Funding for this video is brought to you by viewers like you. Thank you.
With over 1,000 monsters to choose from in D&D, it can be hard to know which ones to use, and even harder to know how to play them. What weapons do they favor? What tactics would they use? How do they interact with other types of monsters? These are all questions that can come up to DMs that are looking to make their combats more enticing for their players. It's certainly one that I struggled with. That's why I'm back today with another monster breakdown for D&D. Hello again everyone, I'm Bill from Altroll, and today I'm going to dive into a brief history of a D&D creature, how that history was adapted into 5th edition, and how this lore can help game masters make their combat encounters better. So, whether you're here for the cool lore breakdown or for the combat tactics, I'm hoping to give you a lot more to chew on when it comes to the monsters we face in D&D. For episode 28, let's examine a largely overlooked creature from older editions, the Peryton. The Peryton is a mythological creature created by fusing the physical features of a generally male deer and a bird of prey like an eagle or hawk. Artistic depictions can vary, with some interpretations showing the head, neck, forelegs, and antlers of a deer, while having the plumage, wings, and hindquarters of a large bird, while others are simply a regular deer with bird wings on the back. Named in Jorge Luis Borges's 1957 Book of Imaginary Beings, the Peryton was said to have lived in Atlantis, escaping the city's destruction by flying away during the earthquake that destroyed it. One unique trait of the Peryton was that it cast the shadow of a human, up until it kills one, at which point it begins to cast its own shadow. This is all just one interpretation though, as some heraldry of King Charles VI of France and other late medieval battle standards featured winged stags. With a mostly modern lore attribution, the Peryton is found or used in literature and gaming, being featured in the Hollow Earth novel, the Fablehaven series, and Dungeons & Dragons. In D&D, the Peryton made its first appearance in the 1st edition Monster Manual in 1977. Standing at 1.5 meters tall and 2 meters long, the Peryton was a chaotic evil mixture between a deer and a giant bird, with a dark blue hide and jet black horns. On its back, it had dark green feathers, and its feet were avian, though its claws were too weak to use. Living in mountainous areas, Perytons would hunt in groups of 2 to 8, each attacking creatures one at a time with their sharp horns. Communicating in their own language, once their prey was defeated, they would rip out its heart and take it back to its lair, where it was implied that the heart was needed for Perytons to reproduce. Gross. Don't take these deer birds for pushovers though, as back in 1st edition, they were completely immune to damage from ordinary weapons. Over time, articles and editions were released that expanded on the Peryton's lore and abilities. In Dragon Magazine number 82, released in 1984, Nigel Findley wrote The Ecology of the Peryton, which stated that Perytons were native to another plane, but after overcoming their chaotic and independent nature, they used their psionic abilities to conquer other worlds. They eventually lost these abilities, somehow, but remained in the worlds of D&D as an extraplanar predator. Their fixation on human hearts is explained as well, with the article stating that human hearts are rich sources of iron, potassium, sodium, and nitrogen, which are the necessary minerals to form the shell of a Peryton egg. This is largely how the Peryton remained until 1991, when the Peryton was introduced to 2nd edition in Appendix 11 of the Monstrous Compendium Forgotten Realms series. This edition added that Perytons focus obsessively on one target in combat, stalking them if forced to retreat. Socially, each nest contained 2 to 8 Perytons, and was several miles away from any other nests. They also decided to explain that eating a heart was required for both male and female Perytons to become fertile, which no one asked them to explain, and it's weird that they keep bringing it up. In 3rd edition, the Peryton didn't appear until the 2001 supplement Monsters of Faerun. Now the creation of some twisted deity, their physical depiction was changed to be more demonic. Described as miserable creatures who hate life, which who isn't nowadays, they consume hearts to attempt to ascend into something better. Losing their unique language, Perytons also could not speak anymore, though they could understand Common and possibly other languages. 3rd edition also changed their group behavior, with adventurers encountering between 1 to 4 of them at a time instead of the 2 to 8 of older editions. While the 3.5 rules update added some minor changes, like giving them dark vision and low light vision, Dragon Magazine number 106 also added a stat block for a large variant of the Peryton. Even though 4th edition's monster manual was released in 2008, the Peryton wouldn't make their way into the game until 2011, when they were added in the adventure Kalarel's Revenge, and later the Monster Vault Threats to the Nentir Vale supplement. Since 4th edition mostly borrowed the lore from 1st and 2nd edition, and the mechanics of 3rd edition, I won't go into too much detail with this version of the Peryton, but it did keep the monster in the game until 5th edition's release in 2014. In 5th edition, the Peryton is described as a monstrous carnivore that prefers to feed on humanoids. A bizarre creature with the head of a stag and the body and wings of a bird, the origins of the Peryton are disputed, with some saying that they're the result of cursed humans, while others say that they spawned from a scorned wife who consumed a rival's heart to win her husband's love back. While the woman's ritual was successful, she was discovered and hung for her crimes. But the carrion birds that feasted on her corpse absorbed the lingering magic of the ritual, and transformed into the first Perytons. In a weird continuation of establishing the monster's reproductive cycle, 5e states that female Perytons must consume the heart of a humanoid to reproduce, changing its shadow for a time to reflect their monstrous form. Roosting on mountain ridges and in high caves, Perytons prey on lone travelers and isolated villages. With settlements being attractive sources of food, any village or town that discovers a Peryton nest nearby is quick to hire adventurers to get rid of it. Their resistance to normal weapons is also well known, with most travelers knowing to avoid confrontation with a Peryton at all costs. Should they catch sight of potential prey, the Peryton is single-minded and relentless, fighting until they or their prey dies. If driven away temporarily, they will continue to stalk the same target from afar, waiting for another moment to strike. Once their prey is defeated, they rip out its heart and take it back to their nest to be fully devoured. Now that we've examined their lore, let's pivot over to the Peryton's stat block. The Peryton is a medium monstrosity, measuring about the size of a deer. Mechanically, they take up 5 feet on a battle map, and as monstrosities, they're generally viewed as just monsters, with no real category or race to speak of. The Peryton is, and always has been, a chaotic evil monster, meaning they attack with arbitrary violence, generally spurred by their desire to consume humanoid hearts. While slightly below average in terms of intelligence, they are sentient enough to understand Common and Elvish, though they cannot speak themselves. Their stats are interesting to look at, with a low-ish armor class of 13, a moderate amount of hit points with 68 plus 6, or 33 on average, a low movement speed of 20 feet, but a fast flying speed of 60 feet. For context, this hit point pool is slightly lower than the Griffins, another CR2 creature, but they have a unique feature that can make that pool appear larger than normal, which we'll get into in just a little bit. For ability scores, the Peryton has high strength, dexterity, constitution, and wisdom, with strength being the highest, average charisma, and a below-average intelligence. An intelligence score of 9 means that they're just below the intelligence of the average commoner, but do possess critical thinking skills that make them smarter than the average stag. As a CR2 monster, they only have a basic +2 proficiency bonus. They do get a few unique boosts to their skills and abilities, with a +5 to perception, a passive perception of 15, and resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage from non-magical attacks. These resistances are really what prop the Peryton up as tankier than they seem, as lower-level parties that would be facing a CR2 monster likely won't have magical weapons yet, meaning they'll be taking half damage from any non-spellcasters in the party. Despite being only a CR2 monster, the Peryton has 3 unique abilities that can help them in combat: dive attack, flyby, and keen sight and smell. Mostly helpful before combat breaks out, keen sight and smell grant advantage on perception checks that rely on sight or smell, making it extremely hard for even stealthy parties to hide from a Peryton that's searching for them. Dive attack and flyby are what really give the Peryton an edge in the skies, though. Dive attack states that if the Peryton is flying and dives at least 30 feet straight towards a target, and then hits it with a melee weapon attack, the attack deals an extra 2d8 damage. Once it's ready to move away, flyby then removes the threat of opportunity attacks from the Peryton. Their threat doesn't stop there, as the Peryton makes 2 attacks per turn, a gore attack and a talon attack. These are both melee weapon attacks with a +5 to hit and a reach of 5 feet, but the gore attack does 1d8 plus 3 piercing damage, and the talons do 2d4 plus 3 piercing damage. On average, the Peryton would do 15 piercing damage per turn, bumping up to 24 average damage if they use their dive attack feature. Lastly, we have their environment tags. Creatures of the skies, Perytons are normally found in hill or mountain biomes. Now that we've gone through and sorted out their stat block, let's examine how the Peryton behaves in combat. To do this, we're going to take their lore and stat block and combine that with some presumptions about monster behavior from Keith Amon's The Monsters Know What They're Doing. The first of Amon's assumptions is that most creatures want to survive, and if seriously wounded, will try to flee combat. Despite that presumption being true for most creatures, the Peryton's lore provides a unique exception here. Once Perytons engage in combat, they'll keep fighting until either they or their prey are dead. And even if the prey escapes, the Peryton will continue to hunt that specific target. With this in mind, their lore is pretty explicit that the Peryton will not willingly disengage from combat, no matter how low their hit points drop. Next up, we look at their alignment. As chaotic evil monstrosities, Perytons are going to kill and eat anything they can, with complete and utter disregard for who or what they attack. They do explicitly prefer humanoids, however, and when given the choice between a regular animal and a traveling band of defenseless elves, well, the Peryton knows what choice it would make. With alignment sorted, let's look at their mental ability scores in greater detail. Perytons have an intelligence score of 9. With regards to intelligence scores of 8 to 11, Amon states that the creature lacks tactics and strategy, but it can tell when something isn't working. For the Peryton, this intelligence is slightly wasted on their kit, as the only tools they have at their disposal are their high flying speed and melee attacks, leaving little room for trying new tactics. On top of that, Perytons also have a wisdom score of 12. With regards to wisdom scores of 12 or 13, Amon states that these creatures choose their targets carefully, and may refrain from combat if it seems unwinnable. Complementing their intelligence, the Peryton is efficient in combat, flying in and out of melee using its diving attacks to great effect. While it is relentless against prey it's set its mind to, the Peryton isn't completely stupid, and while it may compete with manticores and griffins to hunt humans, it won't try to challenge larger or tougher creatures like dragons. With their mindset sorted, let's look at their physical stats that influence how they fight. If the fact that they don't have any innate ranged attacks didn't indicate their preference for melee combat, Perytons also have a +3 in strength, while only having a +1 in dexterity and constitution. This works in concert with their dive attack and flyby abilities, allowing the Peryton to dive in, deal massive damage with their multi-attack, and then fly away unhindered without needing to disengage. Even if creatures do hit the Peryton, it resists mundane damage types, meaning it'll only take half damage from bolts and arrows that land on it. With all this in mind, the Peryton is a flying harasser enemy, moving in and out of melee to get free hits on whichever target it decides to focus on. Once it chooses a target, however, it will completely focus on that target, even if other creatures are doing more damage to it. I should note here that the Peryton is extremely reliant on their flying speed to be effective in combat, and should something hinder their ability to fly around, they become much less terrifying as an enemy. Like the other flying creatures I've covered, they're also capable of grabbing an enemy and dropping them from a great height, with older lore suggesting they would do so at around 100 feet. Considering that the Peryton would need to take at least 2 turns to grab an enemy and then fly up to 100 feet before dropping a target, it likely would not use this tactic unless fighting in an area with steep drops, such as canyons or valleys. The last major premise from Amon is that any creature gets their movement, action, bonus action, and reaction. Any creature that exists in D&D will have evolved in accordance with this rule, and will combine their movement, actions, bonus actions, and reactions to maximize their action economy. Now, the Peryton doesn't get any special bonus actions, but they do get some insanely good special abilities that allow you to min-max their combat effectiveness. Once they pick a target, Perytons prefer to fight in the air, using their 60 feet of flying speed to dive quickly towards their prey. If forced to the ground, their limited 20 feet speed really hinders them, so they're going to want to get back into the air as soon as possible. Once in combat range, the Peryton will use its dive attack to deal an extra 2d8 damage on top of their gore and talon attacks. Considering its attacks are all melee focused, it uses its attack action to the fullest here, trying to stack as much damage as possible in one turn to take down the target as quickly as possible. After using its action, the Peryton will fly away with whatever flying speed it has left, not fearing any reprisal attacks thanks to its flyby ability. As a DM who's had to deal with the absolute shenanigans that is an owl familiar from one of my players, seeing this ability on a monster fills me with evil glee as I try to find a way to use it against my players. On subsequent turns, the Peryton will continue to focus down its first target, only moving on to another combatant when the first one goes down. This can make them frustrating to fight if they choose to attack a squishy party member first, or it can work against them if they choose to target a barbarian or fighter first. If I wanted to keep it fair, I might roll a dice to determine who the Peryton targets first, but otherwise it's largely a battle of attrition to see who goes down first. With their action economy examined, let's finish up this section by looking at how they work when fighting in a group. Despite older versions mentioning that Perytons tend to hunt in groups of 2 to 8, 5th edition does not give us any guidance for using groups of Perytons against our parties. We can still use basic combat balancing to estimate when more than one Peryton might be popping up though. If using a hard encounter as the basis for combat, pairs of Perytons might be encountered as early as level 3, but you wouldn't begin to see a full flock of 8 Perytons until around level 10 or so. Even with that in mind, Perytons don't behave any differently when fighting in a group, acting independently to whittle down their targets before helping others take down who's left. So, with all of that laid out and applied to Perytons, what do we now know about how to use them in our encounters? First, Perytons are flying predators that hunt humanoids above all other creatures. Flying in the skies above hilly or mountainous terrain, travelers have to remain wary to not attract the ire of a passing Peryton. Second, hunting near major roads or outlying settlements, Perytons tend to fly solo, but can be encountered in groups of up to 8. This number can be flexible based on the level and size of your party, though they really thrive as an early to mid-game enemy. Third, in combat, Perytons will dive into combat to deal extra damage on their melee attack, then fly away to end their turn back in the skies. While their kit is simple, their special abilities make them really frustrating to fight against, especially if the party does not have access to magical damage. Fourth, despite Amon's assumption about wounded creatures, Perytons are explicitly stated to not run away from combat once they engage. This dedication to death can make them frustrating to run from, but also relatively simple to engage if a party is prepared. Fifth, if a Peryton wins a combat encounter, they're going to kill and devour their prey. Since they really seek the hearts of any humanoids they kill, it's highly unlikely that any rescue parties are going to find survivors in a Peryton attack, making combat with them a do or die scenario. But that is going to bring us to the end of today's video on the Peryton. A less popular monstrosity, Perytons seem to be overlooked by the majority of DMs over the various editions of the game. While their lore and stat block are really interesting and engaging, I honestly never would have known they existed had I not read their name in the Manticore's lore when reading up on their rivals. What I want to know is, what do you think of the Peryton? Are these avian stags a forgotten gem of a monster? Or would the game be better off just scrapping them from the monster pool? You can let me know down in the comments, or you can discuss it on the Altroll Discord using the link in the description. If you want to support Altroll, you can visit our Ko-fi to leave a one-time or recurring donation. And make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to be notified when our videos go live. However, that's all I had for you. Thank you all for watching, make sure to have a great rest of your day, and I'll see all of you next time.